Quería saber si usted cree que una ciudad se puede describir a través de sus crímenes.
In ways I can. What I was saying there, and I always give credit to Richard Price, who said that. He was once asked why a writer of his talent, this was a very sarcastic interviewer, why a writer of his talent wastes his time writing about crime. And his response was, if you circle around a murder long enough, you get to know a city. And what he was saying is what I said in my first statement, that the construct of the crime novel, of solving a murder, by virtue of the investigation, the detective carrying a badge, it allows him to go anywhere in society, anywhere in a city. And so you can use this construct as a vehicle to get to know a city, or get to know a part of a city, or an issue that's affecting a city, or that's important to a city. And so I took that and kind of gave it to Harry. I gave it as his view.
Primero, ¿en qué medida su trabajo como periodista le ayudó luego a construir novelas policíacas? Y luego quisiera que dijese al público qué consejo daría a alguien que empieza a escribir relatos de sucesos, crónicas de sucesos.
Well, on the first part, I can guarantee I would not be sitting here if I had not spent the years I did as a journalist. I had this idea when I was very young that I wanted to write crime novels, but I knew very little about that world. What I knew was some of the great masterpieces of crime fiction. I was inspired to want to be a writer, but I guess somehow I was smart enough to know I would have to know about the real world of crime and detection, and decided to go into journalism as a means to that end, because I would get the chance through my press pass to go into police stations and meet detectives and go to crime scenes, and I would learn about the world I would later want to write about. And then the other aspect was I would be writing every day. I would learn the craft of writing. And so I had a twofold purpose, and I spent about 14 years as a reporter, constantly knowing that in the future I want to be in a position to write the crime novel. So I was always putting details in my back pockets, little things that wouldn't have a place in a newspaper story, maybe character details, but I knew I could use later. And so it was, in a way, about 14 years of research preparing me, to just be in a position to write one crime novel, and then we'd see what would happen afterwards. And of course, I got pretty lucky. I got fortunate. I got to do more than one crime novel, and here we are about 20 years later. When I had that moment where I decided I wanted to be a writer, I was about 20 years old. When I was holding my first book, a finished book in my hand, I was 35. So it was like a 15-year journey to get there. And it wasn't a tough journey. It was some of the best times of my life. But it's hard to take 15 years and tell you how to do it. But in shorthand, I just think that the things that are important are momentum. When you're writing, you got to feel momentum as a writer, because that will translate to the reader. So if you're struggling, your reader's going to struggle. So the other aspect is just to keep your head down. Keep your head down. Never lick your finger and put it up into the air to see which way the winds blow, and like what kind of book are they looking for. It's got to come out of you. It's got to come out of what kind of book you're looking for. You really have to write for one person yourself. You got to be satisfied with what you're writing, and you just got to believe that if you like it, there's going to be someone else who will like it, and maybe there's someone else who will like it. And when I started writing these books, I had no idea I would ever be translated. I'd ever sit in a theater in Barcelona, and there'd be people here interested in Harry Bosch, but I couldn't worry about that. I just had to keep my head down and write about a character that I would like. I learned from writers, like anyone from Raymond Chandler to Thomas Harris to James Lee Burke, mostly because they were stylists and they had a unique voice in their writing, and that was what I would hope to have at some point. I guess I could have become a cop and experienced it for myself, but I don't think I had that personality. So I became a journalist, and I became someone who watched the detectives and talked to the detectives. And what I saw inspired me, again, not inspired by writers, but also inspired by the people who do this job well. It's a thankless job. You do it wrong, You get all over the TV and all over the newspapers. You do it right, no one knows. And they accept that. That's part of the deal. In accepting it, there's something noble about that, and that I could try to write about a character, Harry Bosch, that had this kind of unsung nobility to him. He just tried to do the right thing, and he tried to be relentless and give it everything he had. And you know, and sometimes he was successful, and sometimes he made mistakes, but you know, that's what is the essence of his character, and that came from my journalism days, hanging around with cops.
Se está acercando la edad de jubilación. ¿Qué futuro tienen sus jefes para este tipo duro que se curtió en lo peor de la guerra de Vietnam y que, como ha dicho, nunca suelta un caso así pasen 30 años? Y también quiero saber si nos va a deleitar a los fans y va a hacer una novela que sea un flashback y nos cuente Harry Bosch en Vietnam.
A great challenge to write about Harry in Vietnam because it's not my experience. You know, I'm pretty quickly coming to a tough point with Harry Bosch, because you're right, he's getting up there in years, and there's just not detectives chasing murderers in their 60s. It's just, and so I have to figure out what to do. And you're right, I can always go backwards in time, but I love the forward progression of the series. I love Harry carrying a badge, and so I'm not sure what to do. Maybe I'm being a fool, but I'm not thinking about it. You know, I know it's inevitable, but I'm not thinking about it because I don't want to decide what to do yet.
Y quería saber si usted está siguiendo la novela negra europea. No sé si ha leído a Stieg Larsson, si ha leído a Michaels.
Yes, I've read a fair amount of it, but there's two issues there. One is translations in my country. Again, it's a country that looks in. That's one of the issues. The second one was when I answered before, I mentioned that I was very well read in this genre, but I said at one point I was. Now that I write it, it's very hard for me to read it without feeling it's intruding on what I do. In the early parts of my career with Harry, I more or less sold the early books to a studio, and they tried very hard to get a good screenplay that captured the character. And they were unsuccessful. And the way Hollywood works is, you know, they're intense for a while. If it doesn't work, they move on. And so I think they moved on from Harry, and that might not be a bad thing. That might be a good thing, actually, that I haven't had that distraction. I have a very strong sense of what he looks like and sounds like. So it's very hard for me, after so many years, almost 20 years of writing about this guy, to look away from the image in my head and say, you know, George Clooney or whoever. Yes, he's in the next book published in Spain has Haller and Bosch together. It's called I think it's called The Verdict, and it's primarily a Mickey Haller story, but he crosses paths with Harry. No, I've never been tired of Harry Bosch, but I mean, remember how I said it's all about momentum? What happens in the writing process happens in the reading process. And it doesn't mean when I write a book like with Mickey Haller that I got sick of Harry Bosch. What happens most often is when I'm writing one of those books, like the book with Mickey Haller, I can't wait to get back to writing about Harry Bosch. As long as he's interesting to me, I have a feeling he'll be interesting to the readers. But it doesn't always work that way. I wrote a couple books about a character named Terry McCaleb, and very quickly, just 2 books into that character, I knew I wasn't interested in him anymore. So I dropped him. I killed him.
How much of Harry Bosch, how much does he have of you?
It depends on which book you're reading. In the beginning, we didn't have a lot in common. But I got lucky, and 2 readers. You know, I got a book published, and they asked for more books. And next thing you know, I have a lot of books about Harry Bosch. It's very hard to keep separate. So we share more and more as you go further into the series. You know, for example, we both have a daughter the same age, and so obviously I'm sharing with him my life. So I think in the more recent books we have a lot in common.
In the early books, not so much. Yeah.
Technology, what does it gives to you?
Writer has to remember that it's not the most important part. These books are pretty much about character and how the character connects to the reader. And so all that stuff like DNA, it's all fabulous stuff, and you can use it in your books. But never, I try to never forget that readers aren't reading my books because it's technology. They're reading them because they connect with the character, like Harry Bosch.
Okay. Thank you very much.